October 24th, 2020. Max Hanks concluded the final chapter of his mortal life. The year prior to his passing, I thought it would be worth the time and effort to record and listen to his and Lois's life story. I'm beyond thankful for doing so because I had no idea when Max or Lois's time would eventually arrive. Grandma and Grandpa, thank you for everything, and thank you for a life well lived.
All right, so where did life begin, or what can you remember?
I was born 4/16/28 in Parker, Idaho, a little community up the road towards St. Anthony. And I went to school there at Parker for 2 years, and folks during the Depression, went to California, got down there, and these schools here in Idaho beat the schools down there, and they advanced me a half a grade. So when graduated out of the 8th grade down there in the December, came back up here and didn't have to go to school till the next fall. Stayed with my grandmother and grandpa at Parker. And later went to school at Edmonds for 2 years and graduated from there as a high school, and went to Texas Louisiana mission in '49. That was one mission, and got home about a month and was drafted. Went to Camp Gordon, Augusta, Georgia, and took MOS for MP. Never did pull any of that type of duty. Was shipped to Korea, put in 22 and a half months, I believe, in the service.
What was that 22 and a half months like? What was that experience?
Well, mostly I was in where they gathered the PWs, and then later on at Yongdong Po, and then later on they went down to Kojdo Island and made the facilities there. And at one time, I can't figure out how many prisoners we had down there, but we had North Korean, Korean, Chinese, and a little bit of everything. The UN helped in that war, and got released at Camp Stoneman, where I was processed when I went over. Came home. I was going to work for my uncle, farming ground and that, but I don't think I had a little over 4 weeks, and they had me drafted. And then I came home from there and went to work for my uncle Donald Rideout. And he and his wife and boy went on a mission to Conway, Arkansas, and built a chapel there. Yeah, married this young lady right here, Lois Quayle, and we started a family, which is Doug's the oldest, and then Burke's the second, and Dell's the third, and then Ruth. Tom's the last one.
Tom and I before we got Ruth. It's details are good there.
Anyway, we had 5 boys, and we lost the youngest one, Niall, in the canal. He drowned. And there was, like I said, Dell and Tom and Maxine, who's married to Jason West, and Ruth, married to Paul Manring.
What did you learn from that experience with Nile? What was
It was tough. It was tough.
Did it change your outlook on life at all, Grandpa?
In ways, but you don't remember them all. You just go with what comes your way and do the best you can with whatever problems comes up in your life. Keep in mind the gospel and the church. Been in the bishopric over at the college when it was 40 wards and 1 stake. Now it's, I don't know how many wards, but there's 9 stakes now. That was a good experience. It's in the bishopric down to Plano with Louis Rasmussen. Just had quite a few jobs around different places and got the property down there, that 160 acres from W.D. Hargis.
What was the process to acquire that land?
Down there?
Well, I mean, what was the? I mean, obviously there was a lot of hard work that went into that, but how did you do that? How did you pull that off?
Well, he's wanting to sell it, and I went and made him an offer a little more than he asked, and he was to do away with the interest on it. So he gave me 10 years, and my Uncle Niall helped me with some money that was helped on the down payment. His was due in 4 years, no interest, and worked out quite a lot, different jobs. Managed a cannery there at Parker where we canned small potatoes, vacuum packed. Idaho Magic was the name of the variety, and I worked quite a bit with my cousin Blaine Hendricks as a hod carrier. Blaine had an eye kicked out by a horse. Never went anywhere without somebody with him. I used to go in the winter when things wasn't pressing all over the country. And just worked. The kids and Lois took care of the farm while we was off making enough money to live on. That property was really unlevel, and we got it leveled finally to sub, and a few years later, neighbors started putting pivots and sprinklers on, and so we had to go with that.
Ready?
Sure.
Okay. So what can you
Add about this place?
Well, yeah. Where are we standing here?
Well, this place, we was here for over 60 years. Right here. When we came, it was pretty run down. Out in here was a old barn with no tops on it, and the trails, and some older buildings over through here. The road went out through the field from there out to about the middle of that over there, and crossed that ditch into the other field, because that was Hargis's brother's field, and he run them both, and run all of that. There's 1,200 acres out there that this Hargis had. It was pretty raunchy. We subbed for quite a while till the guys around us put sprinklers in, and then we had to. We brought water 3 different ways on this place when we was subbing to get water everywhere. Did a lot of leveling. They used to clean the canal out above that check right up there and throw the dirt on the side of the bank, and we used all that dirt to fill holes out in the field here. And finally got it leveled, sub decent, and went to sprinklers. And the house there that house has been built on, I don't know how many times. We built on it twice. Stuccoed around this side, and then this brick that's on there now was extra brick from Blaine Hendricks's job of doing the post office in Rexburg. And the guys come out and help put the brick up. And well, Neil Hendricks put the fireplace in, had to be done in 4 nights. We had to put the rock all in the house because it was freezing at the time. And quite a feature. You used to, in the deer season and that, you could always just go out there and get them, but now with the people on 4-wheelers and motorcycles, why, you don't stand a chance. Of course, don't hunt anymore, so it doesn't matter. Like I told them that those pine trees there behind Caden, why, they were little trees about like that Nella give Lois, that they were planting them in the forest, had some left over when they got through planting what they were doing.
What was did you build the shed here, or was that here?
No, I built the shed, everything that's yours.
So tell me the story on building the shed and the pit.
Well, the pit, why, I decided I better get the logs out before the boys was gone after getting out of high school. So we went up to, the Dr. Hargis had a lot of ground. That 1,200 acres was his. And we went up to Warm River, and he gave us the trees up there. We got 2 truckloads there, semi-loads. Then we went over up over the Ashton Hill and back in and bought a truckload of logs from the Forest Service at the time, while we paid $1 a tree, and had them hauled down. We stripped the bark off from them up there so there wouldn't be such a mess, and had a fellow put the concrete in. At the time, the concrete was $12 a yard. Burke always said afterwards, he says, I sure wished we'd put 6-foot walls instead of 4. But this Comanche, he put all the logs up, and then the neighbors, different ones come, and the old pits before the metal ones, and that, why, they put straw on them and willows. Everything under this has got a layer of small bales of straw, and then 2x4s going this way and this way all the way up, and then some down this way. 2x4s, they got a load of 2x4s at a good price from Salmon. And the shop there, why, the lumber in that came from the sawmill, Wadsworth sawmill up in St. Anthony. The uprights there's 12x12s, and the stringers along there's 12x12. And at that time, why, they cost me $150 a square foot, whatever lumber was sold at that time. We put it up and put the tin on it. This end there used to be my shop. That's about it. This one granary over there used to be where the shop was there, and we moved it over to there out of the way, and then that third granary there, why, that's Doug's. But they don't use it anymore if they can help it, because it's an awful lot of work to put it in there and then get it out again. They try to haul it up to Ashton and over to Rexburg, and the guys won't charge them for storage. That's about it.
When did you? What year did you move into here?
Oh, we got married in '53. I'm not exactly sure. having a deal with my don't know exactly what the problem is, but I've got a drain with the bag here and up to here right now. And it's sure a relief to get that, because I was bloated out clear out here and passing no water at all. And when they got hooked up and started draining it, why, it drained out over 700 units, which is quite a lot at the time. Still have a problem because I have the urge to pay and there's nothing there. You take a drink of water, why, it's just down there. And MRI yesterday, don't know, haven't had it read. They hadn't had it read by this morning. Jason's looking to see what that's going to be. The doctor's having me come down Tuesday to the hospital there in Pocatello, and they'll have to do some exploring to find out where the blood's coming from that's in the bag here.
What about, let's see.
We were here in this ward over 64 years. The reason we moved, why, there's steps, and then Mom had fell a couple times and it was just too much for her to take care of. This addition right here started out to be a one-car garage, and we had the opening on the coming in over there, and before we ever got anything really done, why, her plans changed, and we put the porch on here in the garage, two-car garage there. She wished she wanted a three-car garage, and I couldn't see why she'd need one. But now I guess that's the thing.
Okay. So all the kids grew up here, right?
Yep.
This is it.
Yep. And across the street is Lois's aunt, who was Lillian Severe, and my cousin is Val Rydalt. My mother was a Rydalt, and his dad was a Rydalt. Come out of the service in '53, why, went to work for his dad over here on his place, and they went on a mission to Arkansas, and he built the chapel at Conway, Arkansas. When he came home, why, his youngest boy was big enough to help him on the farm, and we had a chance to buy this one, and so we did. Nobody else would want it because it was such a mess, but we made a pretty decent place out of it.
So Grandma mentions that, like right when you got the place, that you were farming and you were working a bunch of different jobs.
Oh, worked all the time.
Yeah, what were some of those? What were some
jobs?
Of the jobs? Yeah.
One job was up to Parker, and they canned small potatoes like this. A guy in Nebraska developed this vacuum packed can, be about 10 pipes with tracks on it, and run the cans back in there, and the can lids was just crimped on, full of water, and then this outfit revolved over and the water came out and then down like this, and then they came back out and was sealed. So they were vacuum sealed. It was really nice, because before that one we was going hunting out the Selway and salmon and that, why, you'd have to take your potatoes with you, and generally they slept with you so they didn't get froze. But products now, why, you don't have to do that. And I run that operation for Uncle Burdett and Mr. Tibbetts and the fellow from Nebraska for several years. But I packed mud quite a bit for different guys, mainly for my cousin, Blaine Hendricks, Perry and Hendricks Masonry, especially in the winter. If they had a job close, why, they'd have me come and help. They did the original Walmart in town over in Rexburg and the Albertsons and a lot of the buildings around. They did a building up in Yellowstone Park up at Mammoth that at the time I was driving his semi for him. I got mostly all over, out through Washington and that, when they had jobs out there in California. Go move them. And I can remember moving from San Jose, which is just down from San Francisco, moving their stuff down to Los Angeles area, and they were just 2 miles from my dad's there, so it made it pretty easy for the time being to go stay there with him. But Blaine did jobs all over, everywhere. Other than that, why, that's about it, I'd say.
What about you mentioned your mother and your father. What do you have any insight about them?
Well, I was younger. We went to school up at Parker at that time, where that was a high school there. Went to the 2nd grade there, and then they sold their home and went to California during the Depression. And they talk about Idaho's schools being horrible. But we got down there and they advanced me a half a grade because I was farther ahead than the kids there. And up here, of course, you went from fall to the next spring down there, while you went from fall to Christmas and then Christmas to spring. So they just took me and I went to school down there and got advanced. And then when the folks separated, why, I came back here with my mother and sister, Rena Beth. Didn't have to start school till the following fall. My uncle, which lived over here a couple miles, why, to make a living at that time, the rabbits used to be thick in the winter here every 7 years. And he was so good, he'd pick the rabbits off on their hump. When they jumped like that, he'd get them on the top part there. He wore that one gun right out. And then they could skin the rabbit. And the fur at the time was being used for gloves for the Second World War. We don't have them now, the rabbits, in that respect.
So when your mother moved back did she move back to Parker, or did just St. Anthony?
Parker. I stayed with my grandmother, a mile north of Parker. D.H. Rydalch and Esther. She went to town and got a job. My sister graduated from there, Fremont, South Fremont. I did 2 years there, and then Grandpa sold his ranch, and I come down and lived with Niall and went to school 2 years down here at Edmonds. Graduated in '46. People always brag about how they graduated in school, their numbers and that, where they stood, like 1, 2 and that. Well, they'd ask me where I stood, and I'd say, well, I was 6th in my class. And somebody was smart, he'd say, well, how many was in the class? And I'd have to say 6. But at that time, during the World War II, we never even got into school for 6 weeks or so in the fall, because we had to stay out and help try to get the crops in, because most men was all gone to war.
And how old were you when World War II occurred?
Well, that started in it ended in '45.
as I recall. I and my cousin Kent Remington and Kenny Remington, we caught the bus and went to California and was down there messing around and went out to Long Beach on the streetcar that night. And used to be a big carnival place out there at Long Beach. Now it's a convention center there, and the Queen Mary's there. And the war ended while we were there because we had planned on staying in the show house all night. But they turned the lights on towards morning, and the war was over, and so had a tough time getting back over to Monrovia because streetcars wasn't all running. And we did a few good trips. First one we took, we went to Israel. Very first one, we used to go through the Ricks College over here, Association alumni. So we got to go there, and we went back to Korea when I got off my mission, which was in Texas, Louisiana. Why, I was home a very short time and was gone again, and went to Korea for 20 months. And came back in '53, the spring of '53. Married Lois in August of '53, and we lived in a little house, Peterson's, down here about 3 miles for several years. And then when Uncle Donald and them went on their mission, why, we moved up in their house and took care of the house and everything for them. Then we had a little house up the road here, a half mile, that the ladies built on real nice. This house here behind you's got 4 roofs under there. That's about how many additions it's there.
So,
Sid and his wife and family's living in the house there. Mom had fell a couple times, a lot of steps there, and turned it over to Burke, and Burke turned it over to Sid. And then we ended up over here on Glennis Palmer's house, piece of ground here, 3 acres in the back for a pasture. And at this point, why, we're doing pretty decent. We haven't been too sick. Years ago, I had double hernia taken care of down to the VA hospital down in Salt Lake. Not too bad. We've been blessed with a good health.
let's talk about a little bit with hobbies, or what did you do growing up? Tell me about your youth.
Well, most of that was in California. And I was back, Parker had a high school the first time I was in school there, and and then they discontinued the high school and went to St. Anthony, so I went to St. Anthony for my freshman and sophomore year, and then I came down on the bench and lived with my Uncle Niall and Maura Rydalls, and went to school at Edmonds. Graduated from there in '46.
So you go through high school. You're growing up. Tell me about your mission experience. What was how did that work? Did you like your mission? What was the process?
At that time, there was no plans or anything like that. The missionaries was just out there on their own, and it was pretty hard. I think there was one baptism, and Alda Singleton up here was married to Kent Remington. Why, she was in Louisiana, we got a new mission president, called us all to come into Houston. Actually, where we were at in the north part of Texas, why it was closer to gone to Salt Lake than it was to Houston. Took us 3 days hitchhiking to get down there for the conference. And on the way back, I got to stop and see my sister and brother-in-law. Trying to think of the town. Alice, at Alice, Texas. And 2 other missionaries. One from Logan, and a good friend, Hunter from Roy, Utah. Bought an old car and we drove home and crossed. Stopped at the Austin, Texas capital, and then on over to my dad and stepmother's, Violet's place for a couple of days, and then on home, and was going to.
Home was here.
So how did you? I hear you mentioning Uncle Niall a lot. Was he considered one of your mentors? Who would you consider a mentor in your life? A person that played a big influence.
Burnett.
Well, Burdett Remington did there when I was a little younger. He's the one that got me on my mission. The mission at that time, why, he kicked in $25 a month, and my folks was $30, and that was the cost at the time. And I saved enough money to buy that old car to drive home with.
I'll help
Well, pretty much.
you. Jim did too.
So what about? How did you decide on your career in terms of what you do? How did you decide that, and why do you love farming?
Well, I was too dang dumb to do anything else.
Okay. I don't think you're dumb. I really don't. I think you're one of the most resourceful people I know.
That's out of necessity. We bought a boat in '72 to go up and fish in Yellowstone Lake. At the time, why, the natives up there, the fish was all over. You could catch fish off the bank most any place you want to go throw a worm out. And then the lake trout got introduced some way or another, and they took care of the natives. Understand that there might be a little bit of that coming back. Still got the old boat. What else?
So tell me about.
Israel.
I mean, obviously, with farming and with family life or whatever it may be, there's obviously good years and bad years. Tell me about maybe when times were a little bit more difficult, and what was the attitude to get through those difficult times.
Well, the thing of it is, why, I never did hold a crop trying to get more money. Consequently, I never had a crop I had to dump like some of them did. And my philosophy was, if I couldn't pay for it, why, it didn't get bought in the way of machinery and that. There's only two things that took on time. A car once, and the combine out here. Lois won a car at the Christmas deal up at St. Anthony, Pontiac. We had it for a while and then traded it in for a tractor so we could farm down there. But we survived.
So I would assume that you've lived in some different places, but mostly this area.
Well, we lived 50 years in that other house over there.
Right. So tell
On
me
400 North.
about this part of the country, or why do you consider this home? Why is this place special
Well,
to
I was
you?
born here, 6-7 miles from where we're at right now at Parker. Got a lot of relatives here. It's a pretty area. And
Close to fishing.
I and Lois went to Israel. The first trip we ever took, we went to Israel and took her mother.
72.
And we've been to Mexico a couple times. Went with Garth Olson when he took his Spanish class down there. Garth married a cousin, Kay Rideolch, Jim Rideolch's one daughter. And we've gone back over to Korea in '88. When I was there before, why there was one bridge across the Han River from our window in the hotel. I counted three or four bridges across the river there. Now it's a big town. That's Seoul. And we got to go from there over to Hong Kong and Taiwan. Went to temples in that areas. At the time, the temple wasn't done in Hong Kong, but they built it on top of the church house. Used the property so expensive. And I don't know.
Your first car. What was your first car when you guys got married?
Good question. My first car was with another kid when we got out of high school. We worked down here in the potato pits that winter. And next summer, why, he went for Fisher over on working for him, and I went up for Horseburger up at Squirrel Meadows and worked for Cliff and his wife, $150 a month. And then went back the next year and got a raise of a quarter. And when we had the chance to buy this Hargis place out there, why, he went along with the offer that I gave him. We had it paid for within 10 years. Had it debt free. It was an old house, and Lois and kids fixed it up pretty darn nice. Right now it looks really good. It's been fixed up quite a few times. I think there's 4 different roofs up in the top. For insulation, when I crawled up in the top of the house to see what was going on, why, the only insulation up there was about an inch or so of dirt that had blowed in there. The electrical deal was all knob and tube. And Powell rewired everything. But he only put in 100 amp. So later on, why, they had to put a 200 amp in.
You were here for the Teton Dam, right?
No,
Where were you?
New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Went down to my sister's boy's wedding. And he had planned for take us to the Super Bowl the next day, but that day he took us out across the bridge on Lake Pontchartrain. And that evening, why, they were sitting there listening to the news. They said the dam in Idaho's busted. Broke. The water's flooding.
Teton. The Teton.
And they called it the Teton Dam, and we couldn't figure out where the Teton Dam was. That's how they pronounced Teton. So we had quite a time getting back home with the roads out and everything. This area here, why,
Nobody knew where Tom was.
our youngest boy, why him and his neighbor friend, why they got on motorcycles and traveled all over on the canal banks. And the thing about a dam like that, why the water's all gone in a couple of days. It isn't like these floods and such that the people experienced back in the Midwest and that, all that rain. It just,
Damage though.
What about tell me how times have changed compared to when.
well, if you want to know how times have changed, why back then, way back, they used to pick potatoes by hand.
Yeah.
They used to pick potatoes, put a basket between your legs or a sack, and that, or Lois, why during the war, why farmers would come into the courthouse there in St. Anthony and pick up the kids to take them out and pick their potatoes. Well, now you got diggers out here that digs 12 rows at a time in a 10-wheeler trucks. Takes about 5 minutes to put 300 sacks in there. And the combines now, why, the headers for the combine 75,000. They just keep getting bigger. The Crapos up here, that I don't know how many thousand acres they grow grain and potatoes, but they lease about eight combines to harvest their grain. And the satellite deal, if you know how to drive it, why, you go around to the field and lay it out, and then you just can almost sit there and the tractors will turn themselves. But you got to have big farms for that kind of equipment.
So everyone knows that you know gas prices pretty well, right? What's the cheapest you can remember gas?
29 cents a gallon.
When was that? How long ago?
It had to been, was it on our first trip down to Louisiana? California's been the worst place all our life for the price of gas. And
That's the cheapest we've ever bought for the farm.
they used to farm with horses and horse-drawn equipment. First combine I can remember. Now why, they're cutting a lot of the headers on these bigger deals is 40-foot wide. You have custom grain cutters that start down in Texas, go north into Canada, across Canada, and come down, end up down here doing beans in Twin Falls. They make a living, bring their own semis, cook shack, and a shack for the guys to live in while they probably be gone 2 to 3 months at just cutting grain custom for people.
So, give me a time in your life when you look back and you just laugh, just a funny moment or something that happened that it just makes you chuckle. Do you have any of those funny moments?
Well, there's
When we won the car.
Yeah, there you go. What happened with that? What happened with winning the car?
Don't know what she's talking about. There's a lot of different things that's happened. No, we've had a good life.
Every baby.
What about Grandpa? If you were to boil something down for me, what would be maybe your life lessons, just the greatest things that you've learned while in this life?
Well, one thing you gotta, irregardless what happens, you just gotta keep a plugging away. And if I had time and good work, I'd be packing mud and things like that. Wasn't a big job at the time. I remember packing mud for the industrial school up here, the youth training center, for $1.25 an hour. Now they're getting about $16, $17 for hod carriers. But I generally just went up and helped when somebody, Parkinson, he called one morning. He says, "Hey, can you come up and help me for the day?" And I said, "What's the matter?" And he says, "Well, my tender's in jail." They had an Indian that was tending for him, and he got drunk and got thrown in jail. You remember that?
No.
No. She went with me one trip over. Blaine called and says, "Hey, will you take the semi over with a load of cement and lime?" And I says, "Well, where does it go?" And what's Evanston? Is it Evanston that's on 80 out of Ogden?
Right.
We took off about noon, went down through Pocatello and up 30, and got up there where we wanted to turn, and we was 3,000 pounds over the load limit that they'd allow on the road, so we headed on east and north, and just before we got to Little America, why the drive line dropped off on the truck. She didn't get home that night. In fact, it was 2 days later. That was a funny deal.
So that would be your advice? I mean, if you were to give...
Well, I always did tell the kids, I didn't care if they were what they did, just do something. Keep busy, because you're always learning something that might be useful to you later on.